agenda. We have some pretty amazing folks here today to talk about that, but just want you to kind of sit on seats to hear more about that. I think you're going to be excited about this great work. As you know, this board granted the state staff the approval to submit a total of 5 waivers to U.S. Department of Labor. These waivers were designed to help us to serve more holistic, to serve without some of the regulatory and statutory requirements that were placed on us. We felt this would put us in a better position to serve more. And out of our 5 waivers, 3 of those were approved by U.S. Department of Labor. It's important to note that the 2 that did not get approved weren't denied. It was outside of the Secretary's waivable authority. So they're kind of on this watch list. But they encouraged us to continue to track data on the 2 that weren't approved. And who knows, it may show up once WHEEL is reauthorized. We're very excited to really get all of what we essentially asked for. So thank you again to this board for allowing us to submit those waivers. Our NASWA, the National Association of State Workforce Agencies Workforce Summit, was held back in September, and 4 members of the state team traveled there. It was a very exciting event to talk about Tennessee. We were the buzz. As a matter of fact, Tennessee was a finalist for the Innovation Award. And this is a national award along with the territories. Now, unfortunately, we did not win. Indiana beat us out with their Hoosier Reentry Program. But I will tell you, we are a competitive team here in Tennessee. So we've gone back to the drawing board, and we have some pretty aggressive reentry efforts that we will be bringing before this board to talk about, because we know we have some incredible models across our state. But again, these things are happening in pockets of excellence, and we need to standardize them as a common practice. So we're working on that. But again, it's important to highlight that because it wasn't the state team that was a finalist for this award. It was the public workforce system and this board, because what got us as finalists in the award was the realignment. They were in awe that a state system was so closely integrated with economic and community development, and it highlighted our partnership and other partners. And so we want to, again, thank the board for the work that was done, because oftentimes these things seem like just another check in the box, and it's much bigger than that. So thank you for that. I also want to thank Ms. Ann Thompson and Economic and Community Development for allowing us to participate in the Job to 55 and Beyond panel at the Governor's Conference last week. Gosh, seems like eons away. It was last week. But what an exciting time to talk about the public workforce system's response to Job to 55. Oftentimes, people are not as familiar with the role that we play in helping individuals become completers. So it was a chance for us to really highlight the work that our great boards do all across the state. On yesterday, we ended a training that we started on Tuesday for all of our new system stakeholders. We have new one-stop operators and service providers. And so we brought in all of our folks, as many as we could, 220 in total, to do some training, not just on the mechanics of the system, but on vision and strategy on where public workforce needs to go moving forward. So it was an exciting event. It was a successful event. So we look forward to great work. And lastly, we all know about how we serve Tennesseans here in our state, but the incredible folks who work in our American Job Centers all across our great state are not just called to serve those in Tennessee, but we take our commitment in the volunteer spirit wherever it is needed. We were privileged to have 4 of our team members volunteer to go to South Carolina to assist in the Hurricane Florence relief efforts. And we want to really just show you a little bit of what that work looked like, if we can cue the video.
South Carolina is ordering mandatory evacuations along its entire coastline as Hurricane Florence, which is now a Category 4 storm, powers its way through the Atlantic. Look at the size of this thing. This is big, it's slow moving, and it's powerful.
More than 150,000 people are without power on the South Carolina coast. The water in North Myrtle Beach rose to knee height.
We're headed to Columbia, South Carolina to help with the Hurricane Florence victims that have suffered a lot of losses, and we're helping with the unemployment benefits itself. A lot of areas can't get to the local career centers there, but we can take the truck actually into areas that just are rural. Being there for others that need help is always been a passion of mine, so people that need help, I'm always willing to help.
Conway resident Carrie Collins usually works at CCU, but Hurricane Florence changed that.
I haven't worked for 2 weeks now. September 7th, I think, was my last day.
Collins is one of hundreds of people facing unemployment in the aftermath of the storm. Today, people from all fields of work ended up here, looking for help and a way to recover some of their losses. That's where the mobile unit from Tennessee comes in. The van's traveling around the state, connecting people with the help they need to file their claims.
The benefit of this is that we can provide a place for your state staff to be and answer questions. And so their personal help has made all the difference for these folks.
From 1 week's pay to 3 weeks, people say every little bit counts as they slowly try to return to normal.
So this really showcases the work that our team not does just here within our borders, but also we reached out to South Carolina when we heard about the potential disaster with Hurricane Florence, and asked how we could be of assistance, because that's what we do here in Tennessee. And they were really indebted to us to be able to provide assistance to them. They do not have mobile AJCs of their own, and so we were able to provide support there. It is something that we were quite proud of. Not only did we help several citizens in the state of South Carolina, but we also, while we were there, we kind of advanced their cause a little bit, because when their governor and legislators saw units, I have a feeling they're going to get some mobile units of their own. But again, just wanted to showcase to this board that your support means the world to us. It allows us to do some innovative things with those mobile units and some of the other things that the board has approved along the way. We're able to really take what we do here in Tennessee and advance it abroad. So again, thank you. It's a privilege and an honor to continue to be a part of this great work. Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Denise. And as she mentioned, taking a look at WIOA in action, we do have some representatives from Fort Campbell, the Strong Workforce Partnership. So let me introduce John Watts, the Interim Director of Northern Middle Tennessee Workforce Board.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution here today has brought together two eyewitnesses who, through their sworn testimony, will ensure that once you take a look at this Fort Campbell Strong Partnership, you will realize that this is the greatest partnership ever in the history of the United States Department of Labor. I can tell you this, it has never happened before that the state of Kentucky and the state of Tennessee, the Department of Labor, the lead of this grant, the Department of Labor in the Tennessee and the Department of Labor of Kentucky, two workforce boards, the Workforce Board of Northern Middle, of which we're in now, and the Workforce Board of the Western Kentucky Workforce Board, which covers from Bowling Green to the west, pulling together along with the Career Service Provider Workforce Essentials, headed by Ms. Marla Rye, and of course, the pipe stream of this grant itself, Fort Campbell, headed by Colonel Joe Kuchin, the Garrison Commander. I can tell you that this is going to be a blockbuster grant across the board, bringing all of the players together in one sandbox, sharing their toys and playing well together. On October the 22nd, we had an announcement at Oak Grove, Kentucky at Valor Hall. During that time, we had personnel from the U.S. Department of Labor Veterans Employment and Training Service and the Atlanta Veterans Employment and Training Service. And they came up to us and said, "How did you do this? We have been trying to get some people together to play together, and we cannot get it in Carolina, but it got and did happen here in Tennessee and in Kentucky. And it happened because of the leadership that here is at the state level, whether it's Donnie, who helped us out with the grant, with Lane, who wrote the grant for the Department of Labor, who submitted the grant, from Colonel Kuchin, his leadership at Fort Campbell, Marla's, and the other departments, all pulling together saying, we need to make this happen. I can tell you this, that we have players today that are the envy of everyone else in the military side of the house. We've got thousands of soldiers coming out of Fort Campbell, spouses who qualify for this program, and this program is solving economic development needs in Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky. Our first guest speaker today is Colonel Joe Kuchin. He is the mayor of the city of Fort Campbell. And as the mayor of Fort Campbell, he has the same problems that all the other mayors have. He's got roads and grounds and streets and street lights and police and fire departments, and he's got environmental concerns, and he's got full school systems and a wide variety of other things. But that mayor also happens to have a state line running right through his city. And so he has environmental concerns of the sewer system on the left side of the road in Tennessee, and he's got the Kentucky sewer system on the right side of Tennessee. The other thing, though, if you do not know this about the mayor of Fort Campbell and military installations, he also is in charge of absolutely everything on the installation. He owns every single building. He owns a bowling alley. He owns the golf course. He owns the commissary and the PX. And so he gets the normal problems that every mayor gets, but he also gets the others where the spouse walks into the commissary buying baked beans and chicken, and she sees that it's 48 cents a pound, and at Kroger in Hopkinsville, it's 46 cents a pound, and she wants to know why he doesn't have cheap chicken. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor of Fort Campbell, Colonel Joe Kuchin.
Thank you very much, John. I got it everywhere, golly. So on behalf of Major General Pappas and Command Sergeant Major Sims, thanks for having the opportunity to talk to you today. Major General Pappas is actually the commander of the installation, so he truly is the mayor, so I'm more like the city manager. But all those problems that John just described are absolutely accurate, strangely enough. They really, but there's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of value to it too. And so also on the eve of Veterans Day, again, thanks for letting me address you, just to talk a little bit about Fort Campbell. So I'll cover what Fort Campbell, kind of the scope and scale of Campbell, what it is, what it does, and then I'll pass back to John so we can talk a little bit more about the grant. So as John mentioned, Fort Campbell sits astride two state lines, or one state line between Tennessee and Kentucky. We have, which offers all kinds of problems, but also all kinds of opportunities. We have a bunch of representatives in Congress who care about us. We have two governors that care a lot about us, and we have four senators that really care a lot about Fort Campbell. So that has a lot of advantages. There are some disadvantages that have to do with regulatory differences between the two states. We have about 27,000 soldiers that are assigned to Fort Campbell, which makes it one of the larger installations across the United States. And those 27,000 soldiers come with 40,000 dependents. So that's spouses, children, all the above. So a large post. And you can see on the slide several of the other types of employees that we have, between about 5,000 or so civilian employees, Department of Defense, Department of the Army, civilians, and then some contractors as well. We also have military retirees, so 65,000 of them that Fort Campbell supports. And that doesn't happen every day. They stretch up from Bowling Green in Kentucky down to around Nashville in Tennessee. That's an area that we support. So those retirees will come on to Fort Campbell for some legal advice sometimes, for medical services sometimes. And so, but it's not an everyday occurrence, but it does happen on occasion that they'll come on to post, but we have the responsibility to support them for the benefits that they've earned. Something that I didn't realize until I was about 2/3 of our soldiers and families live off post. Most of those are in Tennessee, but people tend to think that those 27,000 soldiers with their 40,000 family members all live on post, and that's just not true. Most of them live off post in Tennessee, so the linkage with the community is especially important to us. And frankly, in Fort Campbell, that is what we talk about to all the visiting dignitaries, all the government officials that come through. That relationship that we have with both Kentucky and Tennessee is what makes us special. I've served in several different posts across the Army, and what we share with Clarksville, Hopkinsville, Oak Grove, is an especially special relationship. We receive a whole bunch of support from those communities, and a lot of our folks live off post, and so those communities are us. Oftentimes, there's a perception that the gates that surround Fort Campbell are some type of a impermeable barrier. Absolutely not true. We really they are there, but they are very porous. So a lot of we are entrenched in the community, and that is very beneficial to us, and we hope also very beneficial to the community. We have, just to give you an idea, the kind of what that part on the map looks like. That's 100,000 acres, which is very sizable. About 10,000 of that, so a tenth of that is where folks live, work. The rest of that, about 90,000 acres, is where we train. Out in woods, out in areas that look like that are mock villages, so we can practice training in urban terrain. And a large part of that also is an impact area, which is where we can shoot artillery shells and drop bombs, and it's out of the way of everybody and don't have to worry about it. But that is our main function, is to prepare those units that are stationed at Fort Campbell for war to go overseas, fight, and win. We have three of the best units in the Army. So the most recognizable is the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault. That's the Screaming Eagles. It is the most recognizable patch across the Army, made famous in World War II. The Screaming Eagles, which you see right here. If you watch or have seen Band of Brothers, that was about units within the 101st. And now, although we don't jump out of airplanes anymore, now we ride helicopters into battle and conduct air assaults, which is a fairly complex operation to put our soldiers and their equipment at a place where the enemy doesn't expect them and where they can't prevent it, or where they can't prevent that from happening. So that's the 101st. A large portion of those soldiers, that 27,000, are 101st soldiers, about 17,000 or so. The next unit is the 5th Special Forces Group. So those are the Green Berets that we have on Fort Campbell. Their area of specialty is the Middle East. So they've been exceptionally busy over the past 17 or so years. And if you've seen the movie 12 Strong, that is about them. That is about their initial invasion into Afghanistan. They were the horse soldiers. Extremely well-trained soldiers who oftentimes will stay at Fort Campbell for longer than a lot of other folks. Sometimes the 5th Group soldiers, because of their expertise in the Middle East and the languages that come along with that, will stay at Fort Campbell anywhere between 7 years to 15 or so years out of a 20-year career. Then the last one I'll mention is the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. So you don't hear a lot about them, but they are hands down the best helicopter unit. So call it rotary wing, but helicopter unit in the Department of Defense. So not just in the Army, but across all the other services. And that's not really in dispute. You just don't hear very much about them. They fly a lot of the missions that, frankly, we don't hear about. They have a lot of specialized equipment, but the thing that really differentiates them is their people and the training that they have. And even more so than the 5th Special Forces Group, the folks in the 160th will stay at Fort Campbell for a long, long time. So some of those folks have been there for, again, 15 or 20 years, just because of the special mission that unit has and its importance to the nation and to the Department of Defense. So those are the three main units that we have on Fort Campbell. We do have several others, but extremely important units and extremely important missions. But what eventually happens is some of those soldiers will leave service. Again, this kind of shocked me when I took the job. I've spent 22 years in the Army as an infantryman, as somebody in the 101st and a few other units. And so I didn't realize that every year we have 5,000 or so soldiers that leave service from Fort Campbell. That also means we get about 5,000 in, but 5,000 of those soldiers leave Fort Campbell. That's everything from retirees, so soldiers who spent 20 years in the service and are retiring, to soldiers who spent 4 years in the Army, are still very young, have had to do something else. And they bring a wide range of experiences, like workforce. I'll just talk a little bit about what some of those qualities are. You see them up there. But one of the main ones is leadership. So we pride ourselves on being a leadership factory in the Army, and we have prepared those soldiers, whether they've spent 4 years in the Army or whether they've spent 20 years in the Army, with leadership. Many of them have led in combat. All of them have led under very difficult, challenging circumstances and operated under high pressure. So you can have a 20-year-old soldier, 20-year-old veteran, sometimes 20, 22-year-olds who've led anybody from 7-man squad to have been in a platoon that numbers about 30. So they have extensive leadership experience under pressure. They're also team players. So in order to operate in the Army, you are a part of a team. Very few of us can do anything by ourselves. That's not how the Army is built. You have to operate as part of a team, and together we are far more effective, and we can accomplish the mission as a team, not as individuals. So they know how to interact with folks from different backgrounds, from folks with different views on life, because oftentimes their lives have depended upon it. And so they know how to operate as a team and to really accomplish what needs to be done. And they're also, I mentioned leadership, but it's also not leadership in a formal sense. So just because they may not be in a leadership position out in the workforce, they do know how to lead. They lead by example. That is something that also the Army teaches. It doesn't matter that whether you're in a particular position of leadership, it matters that you are able to lead your peers and that you lead by example. So it's not just formal leadership, but also informal leadership that we stress. As you can imagine, they're drug-free. You can tell them what to wear. That's pretty easy. We're used to that, and they'll show up on time and be ready to work. And they also won't quit. Now, that's not to say that they won't leave work, put in their notice and change jobs. That will happen, but they won't quit. They won't quit on the job. They'll get whatever has to be done. Which is also very important. Part of that commitment and part of that discipline that we've instilled into our soldiers. So that's what we are providing back out to the civilian workforce. We take a lot of pride in that. But there are some steps that we have to do to prepare them to move back into the civilian workforce. So the Army is, as you will all admit, I think, somewhat different. It's a different culture than when they return to civilian life in the civilian workforce. We have one main program that does that, which is our Soldier for Life Transition Assistance Program. And really what that does is help them prepare to return to the civilian sector. We don't do a great job with providing certifications and job skills per se. What we do is prepare them with some of the very basics as far as resume writing, with learning to interview for jobs, with how to dress for an interview, and what benefits are available to them when they come out of service. So the gap that we've attempted to address is how do we prepare them with credentials, with certifications, with training that actually makes them more valuable to the workforce or to employers. We think we do very well in the soft skills, so that's all the leadership, that's all the discipline, that's all the commitment. But when it comes to specific training, that's where there's a bit of a gap, and that is where this grant will become so important to help them, arm them with the skills, certifications to move back out into the workforce. So I'll be available for questions, I think, after Marlo speaks. But right now, I'll turn it back to John Watts. Again, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'll pass it back to John.
Thank you very much. For those of you who do not know the next witness, Marla Rye is going to, under Workforce Essentials and her corporation, providing the career service providers for this grant. She already does provide the career service providers in the American Job Center system. Again, from the board standpoint, that's the men and women who are out in the American Job Center who are saying, let's figure out what we can do next for you to help you become more marketable for an employer. She also plays around a lot with a couple other things like adult education and the TANF program here in Middle Tennessee and in Western Tennessee. She is the one, when she saw this grant, pulled all of the partners together and said, can we really share our toys? She is the one that made sure that this grant went forward. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Marla Rye.
Thank you, John. I'll pay you afterwards. My name is Marla Rye, and I'm kind of a positive person, so I'm going to share my excitement with you today about this Fort Campbell Strong Workforce Partnership. As John mentioned, this is a collaborative effort, but let me go back and give you a little bit of history. So about the middle of August, the U.S. Department of Labor put out an RFP, and it was called the Trade and Economic Transition Grant. And the state, always looking to leverage funding and provide resources to the local areas, they sent out to all the local areas and said, do any of you all have qualifying events that might work for this Trade and Economic Transition Grant? Now, this is where we get a little bit creative, because you all know the economy in Tennessee is just pretty good. And we haven't had a lot of mass plant closures. And this grant application was for individuals and communities that have been affected by large layoffs. And I think, Denise, you all had maybe one other area that had shown interest in this, and you were able to provide them additional funding. So I contacted Denise and I said, you know, Denise, we've got a pretty good partnership with Fort Campbell, and we're already working with them. They have 400 soldiers that exit out of the Clarksville area each month, and they qualify under this grant. So I think that would be a wonderful trade and economic transition idea to apply for this grant. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't hurt that you can apply for up to $8 million to do this. So again, this is the middle of August, and we were talking and working with Lane Marks and the folks at the state and said, let's put this together. I think we can do this in Tennessee. And I looked a little bit further down the solicitation package, and it said, the grant deadline is September the 7th. I thought, wait a minute, this is the middle of August, and the application is due September the 7th. So it was very quick turnaround. And then they were going to announce funding by September 30th. So we got together and we pulled a group of folks together, and including those out at Fort Campbell, the Soldier for Life Transition Program, the Career Skills Programs, which I'm going to talk to you about in just a little bit, and the Department of Labor's Veterans Programs led by Donnie Freeman. Where are you at, Donnie? We all came to the table and sat around the conference room table and said, okay, we've got about 2 weeks really to get this done. How can we do it? And This is one of the things that I think to be a good workforce area, and Denise was talking about being the face of workforce development the other day in our local communities. I think you've got to act quickly and be innovative. And so that great team put together this grant application in about 2 weeks, and we submitted it to Lane, and Layton worked real hard, and Ivan and everybody else put the budget together, and we let that thing fly to Washington, D.C. And as you can see, on September the 26th, we were awarded $7.7 million. I play Vanna here with the check. We were awarded $7.7 million to work with the fine folks at Fort Campbell and to assist those transitioning soldiers. What is the purpose of the grant and what we're going to do? And that's kind of like, we had this really celebration party when the grant was announced, and we said, oh boy, we've got it now. What are we going to do with it? And so one of the things that we're really excited about is we're going to develop a specialized American Job Center just to serve our transitioning soldiers and veterans out of Fort Campbell. That office is going to be, you're looking at an actual picture of it there. It's going to be located at 101 Ringo Road. And that helped play into the selection when it said the address was 101. I thought that was quite ironic. But we will have that location, and we're going to bring together all of our veteran services under one roof, and that will include about 10 counselors that we will be able to hire under this grant, and we will staff them here at the American Job Center. We will have representatives from the local Veterans Employment Representatives, LVERs, and Disabled Veterans Outreach Program in that center on an as-needed basis. And we're also looking at this as an extension of some of the Soldier for Life programs that they have there. So the goal of this is to serve 1,400 transitioning soldiers and spouses. And the colonel said a while ago, there's 5,000 that leave. There are about 5,000 soldiers that come in. And this is one of the unique things about this grant is that we're going to be working with qualifying spouses. So those individual spouses that have come into Fort Campbell, they may have left a job in Iowa, in Georgia, wherever it was at. And when they left that job to go support their spouse, guess what? They became a dislocated worker. So we will be able to help them and complement some of the existing support programs at Fort Campbell and provide things like maybe one of the spouses was a nurse and has to come into Tennessee, or a teacher and get licensure in the state of Tennessee. So with this grant, we'll be able to pay for licensures or certifications that they need to go to work, which will be a wonderful thing. Also, you've got before you a Fort Campbell Strong coin. And you know, the military is very appreciative of their medallions and coins and those kind of things. So we thought we've got to have a hook. We've got to have a hook to get these soldiers interested in going through this program. So we have got about 3,000 of these coins ordered. And as individuals go through the Soldier for Life program and are exiting and transitioning out of the military, we want to put one of these coins in everyone's hand. And if you read on that, it says, redeem this for a job or $5,000 worth of services. So that's what we built into the grant, is to provide these coins and provide workforce development services. You know, the economy in all of Tennessee is doing really good, but in Middle Tennessee, it's phenomenal. And if you looked at the latest numbers that the commissioner released on unemployment figures, you will see that 8 out of the 10 lowest unemployment rates are in the northern Middle Tennessee workforce region. So we have got a ton of jobs out there that need to be filled. And if we have got 400 soldiers that are getting out of the Army each month, we need to do a better job. And this grant is going to keep more of those soldiers to fill those jobs in Middle Tennessee and Kentucky. One of the things that John mentioned earlier, that when we went around the room and were planning this grant, we did have our partners from Fort Campbell and our partners from Kentucky at the table too. You saw the map that the colonel presented. It is Fort Campbell, Kentucky, but 70% or so of the land mass is actually in the state of Tennessee. So we are working with them to do this. And the West Kentucky Workforce Board, who will also be a subrecipient and receive funding, they selected Workforce Essentials to be their career service provider, so that it didn't matter if it was a Kentucky soldier or a Tennessee soldier, they're going to come to this one center and receive the same services across the board. So what are some of the things that this soldier or spouse can redeem their coin on? We can do on-the-job training. And we want employers, and we want to work with the U.S. Department of Labor's Hire Veterans Medallion Program and get those employers that are interested in hiring to be a member of this coin and sign up. So if they want to do an OJT, an on-the-job training, where we can pay 50% of that employee or that soldier's wages while they're on the job, We want them to come in and be a part of this program so that if that soldier does want to redeem for a job, I can say, oh, you can go to Google, or you can go to Bridgestone, or you could go to Hankook Tire or LG, wherever it might be, or in Kentucky or Tennessee. So apprenticeship programs. We're also going to be working with the existing career service skills programs out at Fort Campbell. And you will see on the slide here that the Army is really concerned about those transitioning soldiers, and they want them to transition successfully into the civilian sector, so much that they have created career skills programs where a soldier 6 months prior to discharge can select one of these avenues to go through. Again, while they're still in the military, they're still receiving their wages from the U.S. Army, but they can participate in these training programs. And looking at them, you've got mechatronics, welding, Hiring Our Heroes, Microsoft, a lot of vocational skills program. Hiller has got a total tech program where they recruit soldiers to go into their trades, and they will train them again 6 months prior to discharge. How does that connect with the workforce system? Well, you know, a soldier can't go to work unless he has the tools and equipment that he needs once he's been trained. So we use these grant funds to pay for buying the individual toolkits, or maybe it's a welding helmet or whatever the tools that they need. And CDL drivers, let's see, we've got diesel mechanics, more CDLs. We've got industrial maintenance and machining opportunities available for soldiers. So what we would like to see too with this grant is even more opportunities and employer-specific training. I know that Google has approached us about creating a specific IT training program for soldiers. We've got Ford Motor Company has contacted about doing some specific training. We've got enough money in this grant that we're also looking at possibly leasing a 7-bay garage where we can provide employer-specific training if they want to come in and recruit 30 individuals to go through a training program, that we can provide the space for them to do it and for them to ultimately go into a job. As John said, we had a kickoff event on October the 22nd. We had about 100 committed partners from both Kentucky and Tennessee in the private sector that came to this event at Ballard Hall. The commissioner was the keynote speaker, did a wonderful job, and it created a lot of positive energy to move forward. Really, what do we want out of this? One, we need economic development solutions. We need people to stay in Tennessee. We need them to work. I work closely with the folks in economic development in Clarksville, Montgomery County. Right now, they have got prospects looking at the area that require a workforce of over 8,000 people. And I'm thinking, 8,000 people, where are we going to get those? With the low unemployment right now, how many people do you think are on the unemployment roll in Montgomery County alone right now? You know, we're unprecedented low numbers. Any ideas? Right now, there's about 3,000 folks that are unemployed in Montgomery County right now. And I'm telling you, nobody guessed, so nobody gets the payday. So I get to eat that myself. So there's about 3,000 folks on unemployed rolls in Montgomery County right now. Those individuals have a lot of them have significant barriers to employment where we're working with them right now. If you take the attractiveness of those 400 soldiers and those spouses that are coming into the area, and you market that as an economic development, as a ready labor force, ready for you to come and work, that's a real win-win. The other thing is, and the commissioner and I were talking on Tuesday, I believe it was, you know, we owe a lot to Fort Campbell. And we looked at each other and we were talking about another matter, but we said, if we just do the right thing everything will come out good. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the right thing to do to support our troops, and we are so excited about this grant and the opportunity. We should be up and running probably no later than December 1st to have all the staff on board and we've already got the specialized center ready. Speaking of the right thing to do, several people have noticed that it is Labor Day is on Sunday, and I would be remiss without talking about Fort Campbell and to recognize our veterans and say thank you again. So I will open the floor to questions of John, the Colonel, me, whatever you might have.
Cross-examination at this time, ladies.
I have a question. First of all, thank you for working very, very hard to get this grant applied for and awarded in such a very quick turnaround time. So very great job. Question, clearly the area where Fort Campbell is at is going to benefit because of the workforce that will be ready, available to fill the jobs that are in that area. How available or how ready or how willing are some of these soldiers once they're out, willing to move throughout the state of Tennessee, or are they wanting to stay in, the Fort Campbell area? Because great opportunity for that part of the state, but clearly, we have job opportunities across the entire state that everybody's struggling to find. Are there monies available for these soldiers and their families to transition to other parts of the state, and are they willing to do so?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll start off with a couple numbers. We get about 33% of those 5,000 soldiers who transition stay in the region. So that leaves about 70% that go elsewhere. And we think that they go different places for a whole variety of reasons. The primary one, though, is jobs and quality of life, and that's something that we stress to some of these employers who come looking to recruit these soldiers. Is it's not just about the job, although that is the primary driving factor. But the second part is for that family, for that soldier and his family, what is the quality of life like, or what will it be like? Because I'm coming as a transitioning soldier, I'm coming out of a culture, out of a way of living that I understand. Now, when I go back, depending upon how long I've been in the service, whether that's 4 years, 10 years, 15 years, what am I getting myself into? What are the local schools like? What are the opportunities for spousal employment in the next place that I'm going to? So it's there. So the opportunity is there, I guess. The second part is that some soldiers, frankly, return home, wherever home is, just because that's where their social structure is. That's where their friends from high school are. That's where their parents are. That's where their social network is. And so, again, it has to be a bit of a pull away from that percentage of soldiers to say, you can go back there, but this is what we're offering you here in this other location. So it is a challenge, absolutely.
And we had done this survey, it was a couple of years ago, but again, about 33% wanted to stay in the local area. We asked them if there was an available job. That number jumped up to about 50%. So again, I think that if we present a job opportunity that pays a living wage to them, I think there's some attractiveness of staying in the area somewhere close to a military base. So, but we've had Volkswagen has come in and recruited folks from Chattanooga. We've had people come in from Louisville at there's an appliance place in Louisville that have come in. So the soldiers are transient, and as long as they've got a job, those that don't want to just go home, I think we're doing a good job of keeping them.
Marla, if I could just interject something too, I think for our board members, it's important to note, we do have a person who works for our state, who represents the American Job Center interests, that really works alongside the Soldier for Life staff, who gets to touch those transitioning veterans to really sell Tennessee. And that's important. They will absolutely connect them to other parts of the country if they want to return home. But we get to do our little spill on the front end to make sure that they understand that there are job opportunities available. And that person is our connector to other offices, American Job Centers across our state, so they can get them connected to someone to talk about opportunities. So I think that selling piece, that marketing piece of Tennessee is important, as Marlon, the Colonel, mentioned. But we do have someone there who works with the Soldier for Life staff in the city of Fort Campbell to help make sure that they are available for workforce opportunities across the state.
Questions?
I'd just like to add to Jason's comment. I'm part. Anywhere they want to go to work, we have them a union contractor that puts them to work as soon as they get enlisted.
Thank you.
Thank you for the program, Jason. You're reading my mind on the question. Thank you. Just a point of clarification from my understanding. I understand that, yes, we can help these folks transition outside that region into other jobs throughout the state and into Kentucky. Does the assistance apply for those jobs outside, so they can still receive the assistance if they're outside that region, right?
That is correct. Now, we're targeting those that really want to stay in this
Absolutely.
region,
Understand.
but if not, we can still serve those, yes.
But the point is, both states can benefit throughout
Correct.
the states through the assistance of the program.
Correct.
Thank you.
You might have said this, but wondering how long the grant period is, and then what are you all thinking about in terms of sustainability when the grant comes to an end? I'm hearing you say hiring 10 counselors, which is great, but what are you thinking about in terms of when the dollars are gone? How do you continue to provide these great services?
I will say that about 18 months ago that there was an opportunity and a package put together called the Bridge, where both Tennessee and Kentucky came together working with the Veterans Affairs and the Department of Labor to put a package to go to both governors to create a bricks and mortar structure for transitioning soldiers. What we would like to do is use this 2-year period with an option. There is an option for a 3rd-year extension, but during this time, prove the value of having this here in Tennessee and for Kentucky to go to the state and possibly rehash that bridge foundation and create a program there. We have, with our regular allocations of funding, we can provide career counselors to do some of this work. What really we need is more of the hard ones that go along with the $7.7 million. About 50% of the money is going directly towards training and skill upgrading of those soldiers. So really what we got to do is find something to sustain the bricks and mortar and the training applications. I would like to add that this is a wonderful opportunity. I thank my fine partners at Fort Campbell, but I also thank the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development because they put this grant package together. It's in their name, working with Kentucky, but if not for them, we wouldn't be here today. So locally, Donnie. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the chair will recognize David Wheeler to talk about the UT extension.
David Wheeler Hughes. So Wheeler's a family name, but myself and Treater Up Indram, my colleague that wasn't able to be here today, would like to thank you for this opportunity, and especially for Clint Cummings and with UT and Jason Atkinson and Laurel Stevenson that helped set this up. So this is based on a request that was made at your last meeting. What's going on with agriculture and workforce training? So if we can advance. Thank you. Oops. Okay, so this is our outline. We'll talk about general employment trends, degree programs at the university level, and then also community college, about middle school or high school, which is a lot of agricultural training with 4-H, which is an extension program, like me, part of extension, with the university system here. 4-H and Future Farmers of America. Then we'll talk about the bioeconomy and possibility of having lower skilled workers involved with that. And then specifically some new and beginning farmers training programs that we're doing, one of which has a big emphasis on military veterans. There's a large number of military veterans that are very interested in getting into farming, both because of the business aspect of it, but also its therapeutical value. Then a little bit talking about dislocated farmers. Yes, the Tennessee economy is doing very well. Agriculture, by and large, is doing very well, but there's some real soft spots in agriculture. Okay, so what's the possibility for some training there? Okay, this is see agricultural employment, both in terms of what we call primary agriculture, which is farmers, but then secondary agriculture, which in this case we define as food and fiber processors that use farm inputs, and also farm input providers. So things like feed mills, the big yogurt plant in Murfreesboro would be part of this, the ice cream plant in Coventry, any business that their primary business is food and fiber processing would be included in the secondary agriculture. And so this is a substantial workforce that are directly involved over some people, and about 56,000 of those are in the input providers, sectors, with around 74,000 being actual agricultural producers themselves. So this is everything from row crop to cattle farmers, the people that run vineyards that provide inputs for our wineries in the state. Of course, you know your labor workforce areas. This is just showing hired agricultural employment by these labor force areas. The number down here at this horizontal axis, and then the total wage bill, or the amount of payments to these workers. As you can see, places like the Upper Cumberland, almost 50 million in worker pay in 2012. These are census of Agno. The next census is going to come out next year, I think. And about 7,000 workers. These are workers directly on farms. And the North Central and South Middle also well. Now, some of our big ag areas are relatively small, like the Northwest and the Southwest and the Southeast. We have a lot of farming out there, but it's mainly row crop farms. Those are big farms, big soybean corn operations, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 acre, but they don't require a lot of outside labor. So things like horticulture, fruits and vegetables, ornamentals, places like Warren County, Tennessee, a lot of ornamental farms, plant. universities offer agricultural. Okay. 6 state universities offer agricultural majors. UT, Tennessee State, of course, do. These are land-grant universities, but also Austin P, University of Tennessee at Martin, which is also part of the land-grant system. But Tennessee Tech, for example. Across a wide variety of areas, agribusiness, agricultural economics, natural resource economics from my kind of area, but things like animal science, huge number of students that go into pre-vet in places like University of Tennessee, plant and animal science, but also forestry and wildlife, and food science and things like family and consumer science. So a wide range of careers are provided in these programs. And nationally, about 1 in 8 people are somewhere involved, 1 in 8 jobs are somewhere involved in that food and fiber system that we have, all the way from inputs to retail. These numbers are growing in these 6 programs. In 2013, 574 graduates across these 6 schools. By 2016, the latest numbers that we could get, 700. And in my own department, the Ag Resource Department, University of Tennessee, we've seen a concomitant increase in the number of students we have as well. Community and private colleges, 10 of the 13 community colleges in Tennessee offer some sort of agricultural program. Most are pathway programs to 4-year schools. There are a few certificate programs. And then you have places like Hiawassee and South College that even have programs. And I think Hiawassee's is an equine science. This is a food science program. And like I said, also a lot going on in K through 12 as well. Okay, how do these students do once they graduate from agriculture? And I'm sure most of you or many of you are familiar with the LEHD dynamics data and program. This is a new offshoot of that program that ties administrative records to college graduates for specific institutions. The University of Texas system is part of this, and also the Colorado system as well. So it shows 1 5-year and 10 postgraduate earned income, and ultimately they plan to extend this to all the LEHD states, which of course includes Tennessee. And you can see that agricultural majors are doing quite well. So you can drill down to basically the major level, not just the College of Ag, but things like agribusiness and management, for example, which is a major at Colorado State. So these are numbers from Colorado State University. And just as a basis of comparison, you can compare agribusiness management to economics graduates at that same university. And you can see that that's 1 year out, 5 years out, and 10 years out postgraduate, finishing your undergraduate degree. And you can see that agribusiness hangs in there pretty well with economics. You know, after 10 years, almost $66,000 in earned income. Another thing we do is the extension service in university. The extension service, there's in every county in the state in the extension service. Okay, so we have offices everywhere. And it's a combination of the University of Tennessee and Tennessee State University. So we have joint offices because we're both land-grant universities. And research departments at both universities are also very often involved in this training, as well as other schools too. And of course, this also includes University of Tennessee Martin, very big ag school. So what does this involve? Well, there are all sorts of training activities that we conduct. Myself and people like Clint and, in family and consumer science. A lot of mine's agribusiness. Example, farmers are a major target, but this is something people don't think about. But farmers use a lot of pesticides that are labeled. They're necessary for our food system, but they have to be handled properly. So who provides that training for the farmers? Well, Extension does. And so 6,500 people are certified in pesticides in 1 year, okay? Now that also includes commercial applicators, but it's mainly farmers that are outside, that are using pesticides on their own crops. Crop variety testing data, 80% of Tennessee farmers use our crop variety testing data in making their planning decisions, what to grow. Youth, family, and consumer science. 4-H in the state has over 320,000 participants. So we're touching virtually every family in the state of Tennessee. And we often do this in cooperation with the Department of Agriculture mainly, but also other state agencies. This is a low-skilled worker approach grant that we're going after right now. The goal here is to grow the bioproducts industry in the Southeast. Okay, and our workforce objective is to improve skills of producers and undereducated workers and try to create job opportunities for those kind of workers. Okay. And so we're seeking to provide career paths for them and for others. And we'll know about the outcome of that grant, which is a USDA grant, sometime next year. A lot of what we do too is new and beginning farmers training, which fits in very much with the emphasis on veterans. And this is driven by growing interest in local foods and agriculture as a way to grow local economies. There are a lot of people, especially younger people, that are at least thinking about going into agriculture as an occupation. And there's a real need for that because the average age of our farmers continues to increase and get older. So we need to train this new generation for really a major industry in the U.S. economy. So there are two programs I'm going to talk about. One, Tennessee State University Farm Economy, that has been going on in Nashville for 5 years, in Memphis for 1 year, and then another one is a joint program between us and Tennessee State. We've just finished a training in Wartburg and then one in Clarksville. Okay, ours is a 3-year grant, and the emphasis on this is military veterans that are interested in getting into agriculture. So our ultimate goal here is to have farm incubators where people can come in and work on a farm and see if they're actually interested in going further in developing their own farm enterprise. And then a lot of the emphasis too is on value-added activities where you grow something and then add value to that product, like having goats and then making goat cheese out of that. Okay, so we're very interested to partner with y'all or working with y'all and the military and the program you're talking about in terms of trying to further provide these services for military veterans and for other people. Okay. And so far, we've had around 250 graduates from these programs, and a number of them have started farm enterprises. Now, not all of them do, but some of them do. That's just one of our posters that we have. You can see training in Wartburg and then up here in Clarksville and the rest of the state. So we're really still in the process of developing our activities, but we already are training people. Okay, dislocated farmers. Yes, the economy is doing well, but it's not doing well for everybody. For example, if you've watched the news very much recently, you might have heard reports about issues being faced by dairy farmers. The number of dairy farmers in the state of Tennessee continues to decline. And so you can have a major regional process down and you lose your market, you have to go out of business, or they quit buying from you, which has happened with a lot of the dairy farmers, especially in East Tennessee. Processors have just said, we're not taking your milk anymore. It's much easier to bring it in from Indiana, much cheaper. Just recently, burley tobacco, big crop in Macon, Smith, and Truesdale County, said we're not buying burley tobacco in the U.S. anymore. We can get it all from Africa much cheaper. In those 3 counties, burley tobacco has an economic impact of over $45 million. So that's substantial. That's a substantial impact on the economy. So, you know, what can those farmers do? What can they do to transition to other markets or even to other occupations? So is there a need for a targeted workforce program for people like that? Because a lot of times agriculture is counter-cyclical. You know, what's going on in international trade is a lot more important for soybean farmers than necessarily how the local economy is doing. So is there a need to like revisit the trade adjustment assistance for farmers program? So agriculture is a major part of the workforce. It has been and it will continue to be. It has substantial impact. And we have economic impact numbers at the state level and now even at the county level if you're interested. Our programs are growing and the graduates are doing well. Extension offers a lot of traditional training, but there are also new training activities for people that are interested in getting into ag, especially military veterans. But maybe we need more, especially for these cases where we do have dislocation. And this is the winery Beach Haven right outside of Clarksville, for example. It's a real nice shot. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
A couple slides back, you mentioned that 10 out of 13 of the community colleges have programs for agriculture. Do you know which ones don't and why they don't?
I could go back and check. I think Nashville State had one and dropped it, probably because of low enrollment. I think they had a horticulture program. I think Southwest doesn't, and the third one escapes me. Yeah. We can send you that data if you just send me an email. You know, right there. Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break, and we'll come back and finish up with the fiscal update and their committee reports. Okay, if we can get everyone to take their seats, we'll close up meeting. Well, welcome back, everyone. A few more updates. The chair will recognize Ivan Greenfield for the fiscal update.
Good morning, everyone. Is this on? Good? Are we good? Excellent, thank you. We're just going to kind of go ahead and run through the numbers here. This will be the skinny report, if you will. We'll try and keep it moving so that your eyes don't glaze over too quick. So without further ado, we're going to talk a little bit about our allocation. Last time around, we talked about, because we had some newer board members, we kind of talked about how the funding allocation occurred and things of that nature. Today, we're just going to, again, talk about the numbers from an end of year perspective and kind of do a year over year analysis. Then expenditure review, talk a couple of bullets around the realignment transitional thing everybody's been hearing so much about, and then some opportunities to do some things different with funding allocations in the future. So we're looking at fiscal year 19 or program year 18 up here. You will notice that roughly receive about $86 million. That's a little bit of a decrease over last year's funding, about a little less than $6 million, but those last two awards are discretionary awards on that F-17. So when you factor that in, it's more like a 4% decrease over last year. Those are by program, so you see the 9 main programs that we have there, and then those last 2 awards being, again, discretionary awards. From those, we have this total outlays by line items, if you will. You'll notice that there are 2 main categories. So of that 86 million, about 78 million are expended in this last year. And then those 2 main categories being everything that's not in grants and subsidies. Those are basically the awards that we give out to our subrecipients, or we reimburse our subrecipients from. The others are state incurred costs. And so the numbers are pretty flat year over year. Moving forward. So looking at that portion that really goes out to our subrecipients, you see that the bulk of it in our Title I programs, right? Adult dislocated worker and youth. Pretty much 90% of our reimbursements are on contracts with our Title I partners. And so kind of taking a little dive into where that money where that money goes and the categories associated as far as training to participants. Of that 55 million, you see that 45 of it is in program costs. Of that 45, about 21.8 and 15.6, 21.8 for F-18, and then 41 to 15 million in F-17. And just looking at the numbers there, you'll see that about 39%, if you will, of the funds that are reimbursed are direct participant cost related. It's a push that we've been making through this board and through our MPCR policy to make sure that, or to ensure that more funds are going to the participants directly. So year over year, it's about a 25% increase, 47.9 versus 38.2% on that. Basically translating into about 48 cents of each program dollar spent going out to the participant. It's important to note that in those numbers, we don't include admin costs. It's, again, just straight program costs. And then that little note there talks a little bit about in FY18, we included in our calculation, some statewide dollars, specifically around CBG. So it was adult dislocated worker and adult dislocated worker youth in 17, but in 18 we included our CBG in those expenditures. Later on, we'll talk a little bit more about change to that policy, and that'll come through the fiscal side overview. So continuing on, kind of looking at some enrollment numbers around the year over year. We're talking about basically 35,000 participants served in F-18 versus 32, a little under 32,000. It's about $1,300 cost per participant. Again, on those Title I programs, adult dislocated worker youth again. So, and I should have said that all of this is in your packet, the last thing in your packet. You probably already noted that, but sorry, yeah. And then there's some requirements around the funding. The local areas are, we talked about the minimum percentage cost rate. They're also required to expend 75% of their out-of-school youth, of their 75% of their youth contract on out-of-school students, excuse me, out-of-school youth, and then 20% on work experience. So you see in the MPCR that 3 of the areas didn't meet that as of June 30th, 2018 of this year. There were some areas talked about some extenuating circumstances with Area 7. In particular, they had a change in their fiscal agent and resulted in some of the information not being received until after the numbers were reported. And then when we're looking at the out-of-school youth numbers, everybody's good to go on that column, but 20% work experience, you saw one area not meeting it there. Again, these are based, the local areas received their contract awards over 2 years, so this would have been on their second year award that ended June 30th. When we look at the 80% obligation rate, basically we're saying that local areas within on their first year funds have to obligate at least 80% of their award. If not, then the difference will be recaptured and reallocated to those areas meeting that 80%. That was actually waived. We reached out to our board earlier on in May, maybe June, to have that waived because we thought that given realignment, that might pose some undue administrative burdens on the local areas. And so the board graciously approved that waiver. But when you see the differences, the potential recaptures, again, I talked about it being on those 3 programs. So the 80% you see here is an average of the 3 programs. The recapture is that in one of the programs, they didn't meet the 80% and would have been subject to the amounts you see there if not for the waiver. So in speaking about realignment, we know that on May 24th, Governor Haslam approved that in support of that realignment, reducing the local workforce board development areas from 13 to 9. We provided about say $11.7 million out in transitional funding. That funding was in 2 fund streams. You see there $6.4 million to the 13 areas to help continue to serve and do closeout type activities through the end of that. Those awards were end date of and closeout of November 14th. So that was to continue to allow them to fund basically activities through the first quarter of FY19. And then the second funding there you see of 5.3 was to help the new 9 kind of ramp up, start up, and do those kind of things, and picking up the baton and running with it. And then, you know, transition is still ongoing. It's not done. There are a lot of things, MOUs and IFAs, how the partners are going to, under the new 9, share the AJC costs. And then there's some facility changes and things of that nature, inventory changing hands and things of that nature. So So forward thinking. We just had a systems training to kind of really some things that we noted in the data management things were, and so the systems training really helped to kind of ensure more accuracy, more timeliness around the reporting. Everybody's kind of, there's some consistency in how the data is reported. And this will allow us to help develop and implement like sector strategies to ensure that we're meeting, we're going after those populations that really have either significant barriers to entry or those who are low income or even priority or services or those kind of things to help make sure that we're not just that we can identify those by area and then make sure that we're targeting those and then having some evaluations afterwards to see how we're doing. We're also looking at funding allocations. Marlon and those guys got up and talked about that trade and economic transition dislocated worker grant. We're also looking at another award around opioid and solutions around that to really get more money in. But also we want to be leveraging or continuing to leverage our relationship with our partners to provide some more greater flexibility. When you think about WIOA, there are a lot of stipulations that go with those funds. And so, you know, we collaborate with our partners. A couple of things that we've done with DHS, we have, and they're providing the location, the TCAT in Murfreesboro. We're providing funding dollars around some training around certified production technicians and things of that nature. We are also collaborated recently with ECD to expansion around our apprenticeship program here in Tennessee, and was instrumental in that as well. And then we're continuing to build and work with TDOC around the reentry population, right? We heard some staggering numbers earlier this week around 4,000 justice-involved individuals per month are being released and sent back into the community. And just not with them, you know, they're TDOC's providing the facility and obviously the pipeline, and then adult ed credentialing, and we can come in and do some training and things of that nature, and it's a win. And then greater discretion around the allocations that we receive. Right now, everything's kind of nationally mandated. It's formula allocation, you know, whether it's disadvantaged used or, but we want to try and we've been having some discussions and intend to take that to the national level, and that one size doesn't really fit all. We want to be looking at initiatives that may be more in fund in line with initiatives are. So, and then implementing, we talked last time around about a discretionary allocation on WIOA, a certain amount, 30% actually of the allocations that go to the local areas could be used for measures other than the ones I kind of talked about earlier, to really allow us to target populations. It has to do with those in high poverty, but we're still working with our wired group to kind of try and figure out what that allocation base is going to be. We're still kind of hashing that out. We're just not there yet, but we're working towards it. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about here today was just potential to serve. And I just put some numbers there. I talked about the 4,000 already. When you look at those populations, that 1 in 9 is specific to our disconnected youth, right? We're looking at roughly 1 in 9 youths in the age range from 18 to 24 are not working or not, you know, they're just kind of how to better connect with them. And then that last number of 4.7 million, we talked earlier in the conference, Deputy Swain talked about those digital traffic in the AJCs, 4.7 million in a 365-day year. So yeah, realignment is done, but when we're looking at what the potential is, there's still a lot of work ahead of us. So that's my 12-minute spiel. Any questions on any of that?
Can you go back to the slide that had the
Absolutely.
FY17, FY18? It showed, yeah, that one.
Yes.
So as someone who's in the numbers a lot, does the comparison, is there a point where you're like, oh, this makes me worried, the pattern that I'm seeing here?
Yeah, so again, this is really showing how we're making a conscious effort to move more of the cost to participants. Early on, we saw some numbers back in, I want to say 16, right? 2016, we were looking at numbers and there were areas that their costs were, am I losing? Their costs were like 10 cents of every dollar, rather 47.9, 40 cents of every dollar going to costs other than participant costs, salaries and benefits, operational costs, those kind of things. And so we were deliberate through this board and coming up with the MPCR policy to help drive costs more towards participants where they're, towards participant wages and other services identified there.
Is any of that offset by the fact that you're now serving? I think the number showed you're actually serving more in FY18 than you are in FY17.
Yes, there was a slight increase.
Okay. Like 3,000.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, what was the?
But is any of the increase in the number, the cost, the dollars going out to program participants actually just because you're serving more people, or is it per participant you're actually seeing?
Yes. So there was a little, I talked a little bit about, there was a slight increase because we started adding the statewide activities, CBG specifically, instead of just limiting it to adult and dislocated worker and youth.
Yeah.
So that impacted that number as well. But we are seeing that it was trending, that we're serving more with less. If not for that additional, you'll still see a slight increase.
Okay.
I mean, thank you. That's definitely the right direction we want, right? With
Yes.
more participants receiving. Do we have a goal of what we want that to be? If it's
That's what I was talking earlier about, looking at the data to try and develop some targets.
And what's our timeline for establishing that target?
That's an excellent question. We're still, hunt and kick.
So it'll be an ongoing goal for us, Tim. Under the model of continuous improvement, we have to see these increases at the end of each program year. So our goal is to really assess it. We want to make sure that we're being a little bit responsible at how we do it. We understand there's some underlying issues. For example, Ivan talked about our push towards serving more individuals that have barriers. We know that model costs more, it's more time consuming. And in that instance, if they're serving less, we know that that service delivery is going to cost more, then that's acceptable. So we have to be really responsible in the quantity, but we really want to focus on quality. So we'll have to look at our real-time data that we're getting from our wired unit, who's able to provide tremendous amount of data to us, as close as real-time as it gets, to pay attention to not just the number we're serving, but really drill down to find out who we're serving. And that will help us really raise that bar, or there may be some times when that bar stays stagnant, but it's getting a greater impact for individuals who really need our services.
Yep. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
And I just want to say it's very exciting to think about serving a lot of new people that with barriers and where we go. And I feel like that other departments also will want to get involved in helping us to serve those individuals. While it could cost this agency, this department more money, I think other departments also will be willing to contribute. It's exciting as a board member to see us thinking about
Have some of those agencies sitting around the table from us right now that we are certainly not in this. Our friends in education, we look at our partners in Department of Human Services, and I think we're already starting to trend toward a pretty healthy workforce ecosystem in Tennessee with the support that we're getting from other agencies. But I think we're really just beginning to really kind of try out the prowess of this new system. Now that we're in the realignment, I think you're going to see greater connectivity and leveraging as we move ahead. I think the culture has shifted. This is really a team of how can we, not we can't. So we haven't really allowed the policy restrictions to keep us from being innovative. And I think that's true of our friends, certainly at the end of the day, a core part of what we do under Workforce Innovation Opportunity as we continue to work more integrally with education and Department of Human Services and with our partners at ECD, because the business aspect is critical. We can do this work, but it's validated by business, right? So as we continue to do this, I think we're going to be able to bring back to this board some incredible gains, and then also look for your leadership to help us really continue where we need to make some additional investments.
It doesn't take a lot to excite an old woman. But I can tell you that already being out there, I've heard a lot of good things from other departments that they would contribute and get in there with us. And, you know, like the Board of Regents, maybe getting in to provide post-secondary education all across the state. This is where we got to get to. And I think it is exciting when you see people coming together to accomplish one mission, and that's to serve those who need us.
Thank you, Ivan. We'll now move to the committee reports and discussion, the first being the Oversight Committee. Sure.
Great, thank you. In the Oversight Committee, we have every meeting had report outs from some of the partners. And so today, Wanda Cameron from Adult Education gave us an update around some of the new contracts and partnerships that are happening in adult ed across the state. And she shared that in particular in the first quarter of this fiscal year, so July through September of 2018, they've issued 332 diplomas and, more importantly, 691 level gains, which is a great mark of literacy improvement for people who are trying to track toward getting their diploma. So we really appreciated that update. And then Joel Blackford provided an update from vocational rehabilitation. This was very interesting to me as they're still in the process of realigning to the 9 areas that we're moving to in realignment and working on their partnerships. But in particular, under WIOA, they had the charge to serve all students in the state with disabilities. And so that's in addition to some 23,000 cases that they have in vocational rehabilitation on the adult side, as an addition of 40,000 students that they will start serving. So he shared, it's a challenge, and really, I think was reaching out to the workforce system to partner with them in serving those students. So we appreciated that update as well. We had a fiscal update that mirrored very closely what Ivan just shared with us. And just had some discussion about the move from 13 areas to 9 areas, and really the amount of administrative work that's created. And I know it's been a lot of work for a lot of people who are here in the room. And so as part of that, one thing that we reviewed was a compliance report that's in your folders. This is just showing the extent to which the new 9 areas are in compliance with the different things that they've been asked to do, such as their partnership agreements and having a board that's compliant. So right now, 7 of the 9 new areas are compliant, and the other 2 areas I think are working really hard on working through their agreements and having those finalized. So finally, Ivan spoke a little bit, a couple times in his fiscal review just now about the minimum cost rate, or MPCR. And previously, the board had approved rate from 40% to 50%. And it's all in the goal of getting as much of the funding into participation as possible. But because of that, the work associated with realignment, the committee voted and brings forward to you all to give a waiver on that. And so from 50% back, also to expand the language in the policy so that it's 40% across all funding streams. So there are some funding streams that the money is going to participants, but it hadn't previously been included in that calculation. And the great thing about those funding streams is when you move all that to participants, you're leveraging a lot of your other funding and your other grants to get more money to participants. So the committee would like to bring forward to a board vote a waiver of the 50% minimum participant cost rate to 40% and extending that language to go across all funding streams. Did I say it right, Ivan? Probably not.
The 50% would be regionally. We would maintain the 40% as is. The 50% was to be again across the region. So along with the addition of the language to include the funding streams.
Thank you.
Would that waiver be for a certain period of time?
Yes.
Just this current. Yeah,
Just
current
a
year.
year? Okay.
Yes. Sorry. Thank you.
Can you say that? Just this. I didn't hear the.
Just through this current year ending June 30th, 2019.
Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any other discussion?
And thank you so much, Ann, for that report. I do want to just say, I'm Sherelle Campbell Street, proxy for Commissioner Danielle Barnes. I want to take an opportunity of personal privilege to thank the board so much for your leadership over the years. Specifically, I would like to thank Commissioner Phillips. It has been my profound honor to learn leadership philosophies from you over the years. But at the alignment, I will tell you from a Department of Human Services standpoint, when I first heard about it, I went immediately back to our wonderful commissioner and I let her know what the board and the leadership here at DOLW were thinking. And she said, okay, get to work. And we made a commitment to also align as a department with the realignment. So effective June 30th, the largest divisions in the Department of Human Services will also be known as workforce districts that will align with our wonderful partners here at ECD, as well as what has been approved by the State Workforce Board. So we serve over 2 million Tennesseans each year, and we want to be able for them to walk in any door and they hear the exact same thing from a workforce development standpoint. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Now standing in for Rogers Anderson on operations report, Greg Persinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today in our meeting, we did not have any items that the board would have to vote on. We did have two presentations from the Tennessee Department of Education. The first presentation was from Jerry Maynor. He's the Director of Student Readiness and Pathways, and he did a presentation on the Tennessee Pathways program, which is now falls under the Drive to 55, which is a program to equip at least 55% of the Tennesseans with a college degree or certificate by 2025. And in the meeting today, they discussed that current jobs out there, about 54% currently require post-education, secondary education. And it looks like that by 2020, at least 65% of the jobs will require post-secondary education. So the the Tennessee Pathways program is a program that starts out in the K-12 school systems and helps students to understand what their career options are and what they need to do to get there. And so that program was presented. And then we had Matthew Spinella, who's Director of Work-Based Learning and Industry Engagement, and he did a presentation on the Work-Based Learning Program, which is a program that allows students to develop employability skills in a workplace environment through apprenticeships and internships or paid work opportunities. Example today of a company called Gastamp, which is in Chattanooga, apprenticeship, bringing high school juniors and seniors into their workforce, and they're teaching them jobs there, so that see if they can be successful there. That prepares them either to go on to post-secondary education or into future careers. So those programs were presented today. We had a lot of good questions, a lot of good discussion, and hopefully there'll be a future presentation to the full board of the programs to give better detail to the full board, and also the things that the board can do to support and assist them.
Thank you. All right, and the last report, Opportunities Committee, Casey Hoffner-Wren.
Sure. So thank you, Chair. And I will say that our committee chair, Mr. Warren Logan, was unable to join us today. So first things first, we wish him well. We had a couple of great presentations as well. Keith Rogers presented our updated dashboard report, which is all of our performance indicators across for quarter one, noting that because of the transition and the realignment, numbers presented were legacy data from the 13 LWIAs. And we looked at the 3 grand divisions of the state because those grand divisions are relatively in performance data. The next report, the next dashboard report will reflect that first quarter of all of the 9 realigned regions. And so we did have a good discussion about potential things to add to that report to make that more usable, particularly for our local elected officials to take that back and have conversations in their local areas. We were excited to hear the report from Carla Garrett about the youth waivers that you heard Denise mention and approved by USDOL. Those 3, reducing the percentages of expenditure for out-of-school youth from 75 to 50%, allow us to serve more in-school youth, and the request to allow Tennessee to provide individual training accounts for at-risk in-school youth as well. Primarily, that'll allow us to target students who have barriers in transitioning through Promise, et cetera. So we're excited about those programs. And then the waiving of the obligation of the eligible training providers to collect and report performance data on all students. Again, focusing on WIOA students will allow us to gather cleaner data there. So we're excited about those waiver acceptance. And then through that conversation about youth, we had an excellent discussion about the connections between in-school youth, primarily post-secondary, what that looks like for a local area, and how can we better connect those youth directly with workforce services coming out of high school. We had a good conversation about adult ed and then the Pathways program, which you just heard mentioned as well. So I think that will be a robust continue through how programmatically these waivers can impact changes that we're seeing regionally with our board. Finally, Lane Marks presented about our grants and special projects. You are already treated to hearing a lot about the excellent strong grant that from Fort Campbell. And then we also talked about the evaluation RFP that's coming up that this board approved, and then potential to serve counties in opioid crisis. So I think as we're looking at special projects and grants going forward, that was also a good discussion. So we're looking forward to our next get together. Do not have any items for a vote for the full board at this time.
Thank you. Any questions? Before we close, just want to bring your attention to next year's board meetings and the strategic planning session. Let me turn over to Denise to give you a little bit more clarity on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Chairman. So for our board members, December 5th will be our next convening, will be our strategic planning session for the State Workforce Development Board. This is a meeting for State Workforce Board members only. So we will be sending out your draft agenda and any logistic information that you may need for this event. The purpose of this meeting is to have strategic objectives for Governor-elect Lee, the workforce priorities for over the course of our next four years, but specifically for our next calendar year, those notable objectives that the State Workforce Board will be focusing on. So that is really the goal. This will be a working session, and so we will share more information with the board by next week. We just wanted to make sure that you had the dates on your calendar, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those after the meeting adjourns. Thank you.
Thank you. And with no further business, I just want to once again recognize this year's Veterans Day, a special one in that it's 100 years since the end of the Great War. It won't happen again. And also happy holidays to everybody. So thank you, and meeting adjourned.